It was the early 1970s, a time when life seemed simpler, yet for Donna and Angie, two young nurses sharing an apartment in Connecticut, life was about to take a sinister turn. Donna's birthday that year brought her an unexpected gift, a Raggedy Ann doll, a seemingly harmless token from her mother. At first, the doll sat idly on a shelf, blending into the cheerful decor of their modest home. But within days, unsettling events began to unfold. The doll, which they affectionately named Annabelle, didn't stay in its place. Donna and Angie would return home to find it sitting on the couch or standing upright in a corner, as though it had moved on its own. Even more chilling were the handwritten notes they discovered around the apartment, scrawled on parchment paper neither woman owned. The notes, written in childlike handwriting, carried cryptic pleas like, "Help me," and "Miss me?" Donna, unnerved yet curious, sought the help of a psychic medium. During the seance, the medium revealed the presence of a spirit named Annabelle Higgins, a young girl who had died tragically at the age of 7 near their apartment. Annabelle's spirit, the medium claimed, sought comfort and love, attaching itself to the doll to stay close to Donna and Angie. Sympathetic to the spirit's story, the two women allowed Annabelle to stay, unaware of the darkness they had just invited into their lives. The doll's behavior grew more aggressive. Lou, a friend of Donna and Angie, experienced terrifying encounters. He had recurring nightmares of Annabelle strangling him and once woke up paralyzed as the doll crawled up his chest. Then, in broad daylight, Lou was attacked. He felt sharp, burning pain across his chest and lifted his shirt to reveal 3 claw-like marks etched into his skin. Fear consumed the household, leading Donna to seek professional help. She contacted Ed and Lorraine Warren, renowned paranormal investigators. The Warrens quickly determined that Annabelle was not the spirit of a child but a demon, using the guise of innocence to manipulate and torment. After performing a grueling exorcism, they took the doll to their occult museum, placing it in a sacred, locked case to prevent further harm. Though contained, Annabelle's story continues to inspire fear. Even locked away, visitors to the museum report an oppressive energy emanating from her glass enclosure, a chilling reminder that some evil never truly rests. The mysterious events surrounding Annabelle escalated after Lou's attack, and Donna and Angie realized they needed help beyond what they could understand. Terrified yet determined, Donna reached out to Ed and Lorraine Warren, the renowned paranormal investigators who had confronted some of the darkest forces imaginable. When the Warrens arrived at the apartment, it didn't take long for them to confirm that Annabelle was far more than just a haunted doll. It was a vessel for something far more sinister. Ed and Lorraine began their investigation by probing the history of the apartment and its surroundings. While there was no direct evidence linking the location to the spirit of Annabelle Higgins, Lorraine, a gifted clairvoyant, sensed a demonic presence rooted in the doll. The Warrens explained to Donna and Angie that spirits of deceased children could not attach themselves to objects like dolls. What Donna and Angie had unwittingly welcomed into their home was not the spirit of an innocent child, but a cunning and malevolent demon using Annabelle as a facade to manipulate their emotions. The goal of such entities, the Warrens warned, was to weaken its victims emotionally and spiritually, eventually possessing a human soul. The evidence was overwhelming. Donna recounted nights of being paralyzed in her bed, unable to breathe as a suffocating darkness loomed over her. Angie described vivid nightmares of Annabelle moving on its own, always accompanied by a sinister laugh that echoed in her mind long after she woke. Both women admitted to a constant feeling of being watched, the hairs on their necks standing on end whenever they were near the doll. The sense of dread was unbearable, and their once cozy apartment now felt like a prison of fear. The Warrens conducted a series of tests to determine the doll's true nature. Lorraine, during her walkthrough, was overcome by a cold wave of energy and visions of shadowy figures circling the doll. She described the entity as ancient, malevolent, and patient, waiting for the perfect moment to inflict chaos. Ed recited prayers to provoke the entity, and Annabelle responded. Objects flew across the room, lights flickered violently, and an ominous scratching sound emanated from the walls. The apartment itself seemed alive with anger. The Warrens concluded that immediate action was necessary. Ed performed a minor exorcism on the apartment to cleanse the space, but the doll needed to be removed entirely. They carefully placed Annabelle in a secure case blessed with holy water and prayers, designed specifically to trap demonic entities. As Ed transported the doll to their occult museum, the true extent of Annabelle's malevolence became clear. During the drive, the car swerved inexplicably, veering dangerously close to oncoming traffic. The brakes failed repeatedly, and the steering wheel seemed to jerk on its own. Only after Ed sprinkled holy water on the doll did the disturbances cease, allowing them to arrive safely. Yet even in its glass case at the museum, Annabelle's dark energy persisted. Visitors to the museum reported an oppressive atmosphere near Annabelle's case, with some feeling dizzy, nauseous, or overwhelmingly anxious. The Warrens warned people never to touch the case or mock the doll, but not everyone heeded their advice. One man, after taunting Annabelle during a tour, died in a motorcycle crash just hours later. His girlfriend, who survived the crash, claimed they had been laughing about the doll moments before losing control of the bike. Annabelle was no longer just a doll. It was a symbol of darkness, a tangible reminder of the unseen forces that lurk in the shadows. For Donna, Angie, and Lou, the nightmare was over, but for the world, Annabelle's legend had just begun. The Warrens' investigation into Annabelle didn't stop after securing the doll in their occult museum. Intrigued and alarmed by the immense malevolence tied to it, they delved deeper into the possible origins of the entity that had made Annabelle its vessel. What they uncovered painted a chilling picture of a darkness that predated Donna's innocent birthday gift and stretched far beyond the boundaries of her apartment. Ed and Lorraine traced the story of Annabelle Higgins, the supposed young girl whose spirit the doll claimed to harbor. Historical records showed no evidence of a child named Annabelle dying near Donna and Angie's apartment. This revelation confirmed what the Warrens had feared. The entity had lied to gain the women's trust. Demons often use deceit to manipulate and break down their victims, and the fabricated story of Annabelle Higgins was a perfect ploy. During a deeper investigation into the area's history, the Warrens uncovered stories of occult rituals performed in the surrounding woods decades earlier. These rituals, aimed at summoning demonic entities, often left behind residual energy that could linger for years, attaching itself to objects, places, or even people. Lorraine, using her clairvoyant abilities, sensed a strong connection between those dark practices and the entity inhabiting Annabelle. She described visions of hooded figures, chanting under moonlight, their faces obscured by shadow. One vision, in particular, stood out: a man sacrificing a small animal while holding a doll eerily similar to Annabelle. The Warrens hypothesized that the demon tied to Annabelle had been summoned during one of these rituals and had remained dormant, waiting for a suitable vessel. When Donna's mother purchased the Raggedy Ann doll from a local antique shop, the dormant energy may have latched onto the object, using it as a conduit to re-enter the physical world. The choice of a doll was no coincidence. Objects associated with innocence and comfort are particularly effective in disarming victims, making them more susceptible to manipulation. The deeper the Warrens probed, the more Annabelle resisted. Lorraine experienced disturbing visions during her research, shadowy hands clawing at her, whispers of an ancient language she couldn't understand, and flashes of fiery landscapes. Ed, meanwhile, found himself plagued by an unnatural sense of dread whenever he handled anything related to the doll. Even after being locked in its glass case, Annabelle's energy seemed to stretch beyond its enclosure, reaching out to anyone who dared to challenge it. One particularly terrifying incident occurred during the museum's early days. A visiting priest, skeptical of the doll's supposed powers, laughed off the warnings and declared, "God is stronger than any demon." On his way home, he lost control of his car, narrowly escaping a fatal crash. Shaken, he later admitted feeling an inexplicable urge to drive recklessly, as though an unseen force had taken over. Annabelle's presence continued to grow in infamy, drawing thrill-seekers and skeptics alike to the Warrens' museum. However, Ed and Lorraine made it clear, this was no ordinary haunting. Annabelle was a rare case of demonic attachment, a constant reminder of the dangers of dabbling in the occult and underestimating the supernatural. Even behind the protective glass of the Warrens' blessed enclosure, Annabelle's dark influence refused to be contained. Visitors to the occult museum reported a pervasive sense of unease when near the doll, an oppressive atmosphere that seemed to sap the air from the room. Some felt an unseen presence watching them, while others swore they heard faint whispers, though no one else was speaking. For many, Annabelle was a chilling reminder of the supernatural's power to reach beyond the boundaries of the physical world. One of the most infamous incidents occurred when a young couple visited the museum. The man, brash and dismissive of the warnings, knocked on Annabelle's case, laughing as he mocked the doll's supposed powers. He taunted it, challenging the entity to prove its existence. Lorraine, who had been leading the tour, immediately intervened, sternly warning the man about the dangers of disrespecting such a powerful force. Unfazed, the couple left the museum, joking about the doll on their way out. Hours later, the couple was involved in a catastrophic motorcycle accident. The man died on impact, while his girlfriend survived with severe injuries. When questioned later, she revealed that they had been discussing Annabelle just moments before the crash, with the man again daring the doll to show its power. For the Warrens, this was another grim reminder of Annabelle's reach and the very real consequences of underestimating her. Meanwhile, the Warrens themselves weren't immune to Annabelle's wrath. Lorraine often recounted how, even in her home, she felt Annabelle's presence lingering, a subtle but constant reminder of the darkness they had imprisoned. Ed experienced a string of minor accidents while working near the museum. Tools slipping from his hands, doors inexplicably slamming shut, and once nearly being crushed by a falling bookshelf. Annabelle's reach extended even further through the museum's collection. Visitors who touched other items connected to the occult reported nightmares in which Annabelle appeared, always at the center of an ominous and unspoken threat. The Warrens began to suspect that the demon tied to Annabelle was attempting to spread its influence, using the museum as a hub for its dark energy. Determined to keep the doll contained, the Warrens enlisted the help of clergy to reinforce the protective measures around Annabelle's case. A bishop blessed the enclosure, and prayers were said regularly to keep the entity at bay. Yet, despite these efforts, Annabelle's legend grew, fueled by the chilling stories that surrounded her and the inexplicable misfortunes that followed those who dared to interact with her. As Annabelle's infamy spread, so too did her influence. Paranormal investigators, thrill seekers, and skeptics flocked to the museum, each hoping to witness a piece of the supernatural. Some left convinced of the doll's power, while others left shaken by unexplained phenomena. For the Warrens, it became increasingly clear that Annabelle was not merely an artifact of the occult, but an active and dangerous force, waiting for any chance to escape her confines. The longer Annabelle remained in the Warrens' occult museum, the more her legend grew, and so did the incidents surrounding her. Even those who merely heard her story or viewed her from behind her glass case seemed to experience inexplicable events. For Ed and Lorraine Warren, keeping the doll contained felt like holding back a storm, an unrelenting force that sought any crack to seep through. One of the most unsettling cases involved a journalist who visited the museum to write a skeptical exposé on the Warrens' work. During the tour, she stood before Annabelle's case, smirking as Lorraine recounted the doll's dark history. The journalist dismissed the stories as folklore meant to scare the gullible. "It's just a doll," she said mockingly, tapping her pen against the glass. Later that night, as the journalist reviewed her notes in her hotel room, strange occurrences began. The temperature in the room plummeted, and an overwhelming sense of dread washed over her. She heard faint scratching sounds at the door, which she dismissed as her imagination. But when she turned off the lights to sleep, her bedside lamp flickered back on, revealing the shadowy silhouette of a figure in the corner. The journalist fled the room, leaving her belongings behind. She later refused to publish her article, claiming she had seen something she could not explain. The Warrens also encountered a new wave of visitors seeking Annabelle for their own dark purposes. Some were practitioners of the occult who believed they could harness the doll's energy for rituals. One such visitor attempted to break into the museum at night, only to be found unconscious outside Annabelle's case, murmuring incoherently about blue flames, and The Girl with No Face, Lorraine's clairvoyant abilities revealed more sinister visions connected to Annabelle. She began experiencing dreams of a young girl with pale blue eyes, her hair a shade of unnatural light blue. The girl's expression was void of emotion, but her presence radiated malice. In one vision, Lorraine saw a shadowy figure standing behind the girl, its skeletal hand resting on her shoulder, guiding her actions. It became clear that the entity within Annabelle was not merely inhabiting the doll. It was using it as a lure, a bait to draw in the curious and the defiant. The Warrens also noticed a pattern among those who interacted with Annabelle. Whether skeptics, thrill seekers, or the devoutly faithful, nearly all reported recurring nightmares, accidents, or eerie coincidences in the days following their encounter. Ed described it as a curse that latched onto the psyche, feeding off fear and disbelief. As the doll's influence spread, the Warrens sought to reinforce their protective measures. They brought in spiritual leaders from multiple faiths to bless the museum and perform rites around Annabelle's case. But even these measures didn't stop Annabelle's legend from growing. Tales of the cursed doll began to circulate globally, each account more harrowing than the last. The eerie grip Annabelle had on those who encountered her grew stronger as the years passed, and the Warrens' efforts to keep her contained were increasingly tested. The doll, locked away in its glass case, was more than just an object. It was a portal, an entryway for the malevolent force within it to reach into the world and extend its influence. What the Warrens had feared most seemed to be happening. Annabelle was becoming more powerful with every passing year. The final straw came when a group of paranormal investigators, eager to prove their bravery, arrived at the occult museum. Among them was a man named John, who was convinced that he could exorcise Annabelle himself, despite the warnings and the severity of the situation. He mocked the idea that the doll was anything more than a simple relic, the product of overactive imaginations. The Warrens, who had spent years dealing with dark entities, warned him to leave it alone, but John refused to heed their advice. He claimed that if Annabelle was indeed possessed, he could banish the demon using his own techniques. In a moment of reckless defiance, John approached Annabelle's glass case and attempted to challenge the spirit inhabiting the doll. He knocked on the glass, chanting words in a language the Warrens didn't recognize. As soon as he made contact, the atmosphere in the museum shifted. The air grew thick and heavy, and a dark, almost suffocating presence seemed to emerge from the doll. John felt a sudden wave of dizziness, his vision blurring, as if the very force of the entity inside Annabelle was pushing against him. Lorraine, who was observing from the other side of the room, instantly felt the surge of malevolent energy and shouted for him to stop. But it was too late. Moments after John's failed attempt at exorcism, the temperature in the room dropped to freezing, and the lights began to flicker. A chilling, guttural growl echoed throughout the museum, reverberating off the walls. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the energy subsided. John collapsed to the floor, his face pale and drenched in sweat. He was unable to speak, his eyes wide with fear, staring at something invisible in the air. It was clear that the demon within Annabelle had been stirred, and its anger was now focused squarely on him. Over the next few days, John experienced terrifying visions. He would wake in the middle of the night, his room dark except for a single, flickering candle. In the shadows, he would see a figure, pale with lifeless blue eyes, watching him from the corner of the room. The same image Lorraine had described seeing in her visions years before. The figure would follow him throughout his day, its presence always lingering at the edge of his awareness. He began to lose sleep, his health deteriorating, as the force within Annabelle continued to torment him. Desperate, John sought the help of exorcists, but the demon within Annabelle was unlike anything they had encountered before. They could not expel it, and soon, they, too, became victims of the curse. One priest who attempted to perform an exorcism on John was found dead under mysterious circumstances. His body contorted in a grotesque position, his face twisted in a permanent expression of horror. The Warrens realized that Annabelle was not just a doll. It was an anchor, a vessel for an ancient evil that could not be so easily dismissed. They made the decision to move Annabelle once again, this time to a location that was even more secure, one that would prevent the demon from escaping. After several failed attempts at containment, the only solution was to imprison the doll in a specially designed, consecrated box that was placed within the occult museum's most sacred space. Even then, Lorraine could still feel Annabelle's presence in her dreams. The doll had left an indelible mark on them, and it seemed that no matter how much they tried to contain it, Annabelle's darkness would continue to haunt their lives. The Warrens had hoped that the final containment of Annabelle would end the nightmare. But as the years passed, it became evident that the doll's curse had not simply been contained. It had spread like a shadow, casting its dark influence far beyond the walls of the occult museum. Despite being locked away in the specially designed, consecrated box, the whispers of Annabelle's power continued to reverberate through the paranormal community. The museum, once a place of fascination for the curious and the brave, had transformed into a site of cautionary tales. Visitors, even those who had heard about Annabelle's power, felt an inexplicable unease the moment they set foot inside. Some reported seeing shadows darting in their peripheral vision. Others heard faint cries of a child. And yet, no one could deny the inexplicable sense that something malevolent was lurking just out of sight, a presence that could not be shaken. Then, in 2019, an event took place that would send shockwaves through the paranormal world. A group of amateur ghost hunters, eager to prove their skills, decided to attempt a night investigation inside the occult museum. With cameras rolling and spirit boxes in hand, they ventured into the dimly lit space, their laughter and banter soon replaced by an unsettling quiet. They circled around the room where Annabelle's box was stored, taunting the doll and challenging its power. One of the investigators, who had been particularly vocal about how the story of Annabelle was just a myth, dared to touch the glass of the box. The moment his hand made contact, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The temperature dropped, and a deep, guttural voice suddenly emanated from the darkness. The voice was not human. It sounded as though it came from something ancient, something malevolent. The investigators' equipment malfunctioned, their spirit box screeching with static, and the air became thick with a palpable sense of fear. It was then that the group began to feel an overwhelming sense of dread, as if they were being watched, not by a human force, but by something far more sinister. Suddenly, one of the investigators collapsed, his eyes wide with terror, and his body stiffened. His friends rushed to his side, but he remained unresponsive, his breath shallow and labored. It took hours for the group to revive him, and when he finally regained consciousness, his first words were chilling. "The doll, it's watching." The investigators left the museum in haste, promising never to return. Ed and Lorraine Warren had passed away by this point, but their legacy lived on in their work, and Annabelle remained one of their most infamous cases. It was clear to those who had studied the case that the doll was not just haunted. It was the host of something far more terrifying, a demon with its own agenda. The curse, it seemed, had no intention of ending. It was a perpetual force, a malevolent presence that fed on fear, skepticism, and defiance. No matter how many times Annabelle was contained or removed, her influence remained, silently waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to challenge it. The legend of Annabelle continues to this day, as more and more stories emerge of people who have come into contact with her and suffered inexplicable events afterward. While the doll's physical form is still locked away in the occult museum, its legend continues to grow, feeding off the fear and curiosity of those who dare to inquire. The chilling truth about Annabelle is that she is more than a doll. She is a curse, a demon, a force that will never truly be contained. As long as her story is told, as long as her name is whispered in the dark, Annabelle's power will live on. Annabelle's terrifying legacy is far from over. If you dare to know more about the dark history of Annabelle, like, share, and subscribe for the latest chilling night stories.